The opening scene introduces us to John Brickner, who has just gotten out of prison. He served only 4 years instead of 7 for the murder charges he had committed in the past. Once free, he intends to repent and start a new life. For that, he moved to Seattle and got a job as a construction worker. One night, while John was visiting a bar, he saw a waiter named Frankie being harassed by 3 people. John felt compelled to teach the 3 people a lesson. He walked over to one of them, twisted his neck, and held the face of the intruder while apologizing to Frankie. The 3 finally left the bar. Seeing the incident, the bar owner offered John a job at his bar as a security guard. John accepted the offer and started doing 2 jobs at once. In the morning, he worked as a construction worker, while at night, he worked at the bar as a security guard. The next day, John began his duties as a security guard. He tried to reconcile 2 drunk customers who were involved in a fight. Before long, the 2 of them made a fuss again. Reluctantly, John had to hit the 2 men so they would leave the bar. The incident was witnessed by Frankie's boyfriend, Reno Paul Saint. Reno then offered John a job and gave him his business card, asking John to contact him if he was interested. Politely, John turned it down because he already had 2 jobs. One day, after working as a construction worker, John was approached by a woman named Veronica. It turned out that Veronica was the wife of the person John had killed. She was also the one who had sent a petition for John to be released from prison, allowing him to serve only half his sentence. However, Veronica's efforts to get John out were not without a price. She asked John to provide $250,000 to help pay for her daughter's heart transplant surgery. To make amends, John had to help Veronica find the money for her daughter's surgery. When he came home, he counted all the money he had, but of course, the amount was far from the total cost Veronica had asked for. Feeling pressed, John met with Frankie to ask for Reno's address. Later, Frankie took John to meet Reno somewhere. When he met Reno, John was taken to a very crowded building. John asked for the job that Reno had offered. Reno then invited John to follow him into the building. It turned out that inside, there was a battle arena. All around him, the audience cheered for the fighter. Reno wanted John to be his fighter, and with each victory, they would earn the stake. Despite being on parole, John refused to engage in the illegal fights. He remained firm in his stance, even though Reno tried to force him. The next day, John went to Veronica's house. There, he apologized for not being able to get the money Veronica needed. Hearing this, Veronica brought up and reminded John of the promise he made while in prison. At that time, John had promised to do anything to atone for his mistakes. Veronica's commotion and screams were overheard by her daughter, Sarah, who then came out of her room to check what was going on. When John saw Sarah, who was sick and weak, he felt sorry for her. Finally, John promised to try to find the money for Sarah's medical expenses. The next morning, while John was working in construction, his boss suddenly fired him for a small mistake. However, not long after, his boss had a heart attack and collapsed in front of John. Luckily, he received first aid, thanks to John's quick action and breathing assistance. That night, John returned to the arena to spectate. There, he noticed Reno and Frankie watching the ongoing fight. Unfortunately, Reno's fighter suffered a severe injury and was immediately taken to a room. Upon inspection, it was clear that the fighter was not in a condition to continue the second round, which was about to begin. John then offered to take the fighter's place. However, the fight had not even started yet when it was interrupted by the appearance of Mr. Wolf, who wanted to collect a debt from Reno. Reno promised to pay off his debt after the game was over. Not long after, the match started. Punches and kicks were launched by both fighters, and the audience cheered until the round was over. In the next round, fighters were allowed to use weapons. John's opponent used an iron club to attack him. John was hit by his opponent's blow but managed to fight back. Finally, with his bare hands, John defeated his opponent and won the match. While in the locker room, John was given the money he had won by Reno. However, John gave some of the money to the first fighter he had replaced. A few days later, Reno and Frankie came to John, who had just finished his morning run. Reno offered John the opportunity to fight in the next match. Considering he still needed a lot of money, John agreed. Reno also invited John to live with him to prepare for the fight. Reno and John met Deacon, the judge who presided over the matches, at a restaurant. They discussed the requirements for the upcoming fight. Reno, who had gone bankrupt, was unable to qualify for a bet that required a substantial amount of money. Another issue was John's status as a parolee, but at the end of the conversation, John was able to convince Deacon to let him fight. Reno was seen pawning the ring left by his father, who was a former legendary fighter, to fund the next match. Later, Reno brought John to meet someone named Nestor. However, upon their arrival, Nestor ordered his men to kill Reno because he had failed to pay his debts on time. Seeing this, John immediately intervened with Nestor's men, who were ready to take Reno. John stated that he was ready to fight under one condition: if he won, Nestor must free Reno; however, if he lost, he would pay all of Reno's debts. Finally, the 10-minute battle, with a stake of $10,000, began. John fought Nestor's man fairly easily, launching punches and kicks that hit his opponent until his opponent fell motionless. At last, John won the fight, and he and Reno immediately left the place. On their way home, John received a call from Veronica, who informed him that her daughter had been rushed to the hospital because she was unconscious. Feeling deeply concerned, John visited the hospital and saw Veronica's daughter lying weakly on the bed. This strengthened his determination to do his best to help Sarah, ensuring that she could undergo surgery as soon as possible. At the hospital, John overheard a conversation between Reno and Frankie in the living room. Frankie felt that Reno was using John to pay off his debts. Reno did not accept Frankie's accusation. According to Reno, John, who was an ex-convict, was not as good as Frankie thought. Reno even accused Frankie of having a crush on John. John immediately appeared after eavesdropping on their conversation and went straight to his room. That night, as John was getting ready to fight, Reno apologized for his words. Day after day, John continued to win the wild battles. However, the money he earned was still not enough to qualify for a fight against the reigning champion, Sharp. John's name gained increasing fame, which made other fighters lose their courage. Some scheduled fights were even cancelled because opponents were afraid of losing to John. Reno assured John that this was natural and promised to find another fighter to face him. Later, when John went out for a drink at a bar, he noticed two people watching him from a car. It turned out that these two people worked for Subwarat Veltz, a wealthy tycoon who had loaned money to Reno. Meanwhile, Reno, who was gambling elsewhere, was confronted by Veltz's men. Reno begged and asked for more time to pay off his debts. Veltz's men gave Reno was given 1 week, however, if Reno failed, Veltz's men would injure Frankie. One night, John had a match with a fighter from Mexico. In a fairly fierce battle, John managed to defeat his opponent and win the match. After that, John celebrated his victory with Reno and Frankie at a bar. There, John asked Reno why he hadn't arranged his fight with Sharp. Reno argued that after John's name became famous, they increased the amount of the bet, so they still had to raise more money to cover the cost. Not long after, John received a call from Veronica. He and Reno immediately went to Veronica's house. When they arrived, they found Veronica unconscious. John also discovered a letter revealing the cancellation of a heart donor for Sarah. It turned out that this news had frustrated Veronica to the point of attempting suicide. Wasting no time, John took Veronica to the hospital. While waiting for Veronica there, John told Frankie the reason why he had been fighting all this time: it was to save the life of a child whose father he had accidentally killed. Not long after, John received word that Veronica had regained consciousness. He then reassured her, asking her to be patient as he was doing his best to raise the money needed for her daughter's surgery. Meanwhile, Reno went to the pawn shop to redeem his father's ring. However, due to Reno's late redemption, his father's ring had been sold to someone else at a much higher price. Reno felt annoyed but couldn't do anything about it. One night, John fought again with Nestor's man. It turned out that Reno and Nestor had arranged a match with a stake of $150,000 each. John requested Nestor to tell his man to surrender, but Nestor refused to budge. He insisted that the fight continue. Because John was afraid of killing his opponent, he decided to forfeit the fight. As a result, Nestor won the match. At the same time, Veltz's men came to Reno and beat him severely for being late in paying his debt. The next day, John was followed by Veltz's men again. They asked John to come with them and took him to a luxurious house. There, he met Veltz, who turned out to be the father-in-law of John's boss at the construction site. In return for having saved his son-in-law during the heart attack, Veltz offered to do whatever John asked of him. John made 2 requests: first, $150,000 for Sarah's heart surgery, and second, to have all of Reno's debts paid off. However, Veltz was only willing to grant one request, leaving the decision to John. John chose to write off Reno's debts. After meeting Veltz, John said goodbye to Reno and Frankie, as he wanted to move out of Reno's house. Reno thanked John for helping him escape the bonds of debt that entangled him. Reno was deeply grateful to John. Not long after, Reno received a call informing him that someone had placed a stake for John to fight against the defending champion, Sharp. That night, John arrived at the arena to fight Sharp. Sharp proved to be a formidable opponent and was quite difficult to defeat. However, John managed to prevail and raised his hands in victory. Later, Veronica was seen running down the hospital hallway. It turned out that Sarah's operation fees had been secured. John also visited the hospital to offer his support. Veronica was incredibly grateful for John's help. Afterwards, Reno and Frankie arrived at the hospital. There, John returned Reno's father's ring, which he had purchased back from the pawn shop. Thanks for watching. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a wonderful day.